Yes, step out of the vehicle, now.
For a rolling stop? Officer, that's not lawful. Write the ticket.
I smell marijuana. Don't make this harder.
There is no marijuana. I'm the state prosecutor. You're crossing a line.
You're under arrest.
I am exiting under duress. Remember this moment.
Yes.
The suburb of Oak Creek was the kind of place where lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the loudest noise was usually a leaf blower. It was 10:15 a.m. on a bright, clear Tuesday in October. Officer Kyle Vance sat in his cruiser parked partially obscured by a large oak tree near the intersection of Elm and Sycamore. He was bored. To Vance, a quiet shift wasn't a good thing. It was a missed opportunity. He had a reputation back at the precinct, one that the younger officers admired and the older veterans, the ones who had seen careers rise and fall, viewed with deep suspicion. Vance was a hunter. He didn't wait for calls. He went looking for trouble. And if he couldn't find trouble, he had a knack for creating it. He was scanning the traffic, his eyes filtering every car through a lens of suspicion. A soccer mom in a minivan. Ignore. A contractor in a pickup truck. Ignore. Then he saw it. A charcoal gray Mercedes-Benz GLS gleaming in the sunlight, rolling slowly toward the stop sign. Behind the wheel was a black woman. She looked to be in her early 50s, wearing sunglasses. To most people, this was just a neighbor driving home or to work. To Kyle Vance, it was an anomaly. In his biased mental map of Oak Creek, black women didn't drive $80,000 SUVs unless they were up to something. Maybe she was a domestic worker stealing the car. Maybe she was a drug courier moving product through the suburbs to avoid the highway. Vance watched as the Mercedes slowed at the stop sign. The wheels almost stopped but rolled slightly before the driver accelerated smoothly to turn right. It was the infamous California roll, a technical infraction committed by 90% of drivers in the neighborhood. Usually Vance wouldn't blink, but today he saw his opening. He threw his car into gear tires crunching on the gravel and swung out behind her. He didn't hit the lights immediately. He tailed her for 2 blocks running the plates. The car came back registered to an E. Ross at a local address. No warrants, no stolen report. That should have been the end of it. But Vance was already committed to the narrative in his head. The car was too nice. The driver was too calm. She glanced in her rearview mirror but didn't speed up or act nervous. To Vance, that wasn't innocence. That was a hardened criminal playing it cool. He flipped on his overhead lights and chirped the siren. Elena Ross sighed as she saw the red and blue lights flash in her mirror. She was 52 years old, a woman of immense poise and intellect who had spent the last 25 years climbing the ladder of the state's legal system. She was currently the lead state prosecutor, a woman who put murderers, rapists, and corrupt politicians behind bars. She was mentally rehearsing her opening statement for a high-profile homicide trial scheduled to start at 1:00 p.m. She checked her speedometer. She was going 25 in a 25. She knew she hadn't paused for a full 3 seconds at the stop sign back there. A bad habit she meant to correct, but being pulled over for it felt excessive. Still, she respected the law. She signaled, pulled over to the curb safely, and put the car in park. She lowered all 4 windows, a standard safety practice she taught her children, and placed her hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. She expected a quick warning and a ticket. She had no idea she was about to meet a man who had already decided she was guilty of something anything other than driving to work. Officer Vance approached the Mercedes with his hand resting on his holster, a tactile reminder of his authority. He approached the passenger side first, peering through the open windows. The interior was pristine. Leather seats, the smell of vanilla air freshener, and in the back seat, 3 heavy cardboard banker's boxes stacked neatly. Vance's eyes narrowed. Boxes. Transporting something. He walked around to the driver's side, his posture stiff, his face set in a scowl meant to intimidate. "License and registration," Vance demanded, dispensing with the usual "good morning" or "do you know why I stopped you?" Elena Ross turned her head slowly, removing her sunglasses to reveal sharp, intelligent eyes that had stared down cold-blooded killers. Good morning, officer. She said, her voice calm, possessing the natural authority of someone used to commanding a courtroom. May I reach into my purse on the passenger seat to retrieve them? Do it slowly, Vance snapped. Elena retrieved her wallet and the registration from the glove box, handing them out the window. Vance snatched them, glancing at the name. Elena Ross. It meant nothing to him. He didn't follow local politics, and he rarely spent time in the courtroom. He preferred the street. You know you ran that stop sign back on Elm, Vance accused. I believe I slowed down significantly, officer, but if I failed to come to a complete stop, I apologize. I'm on my way to the courthouse, and perhaps I was a bit distracted thinking about work. The courthouse. Vance smirked, looking at the boxes in the back again. You got a court date? You in some kind of trouble, Ms. Ross? Elena paused, realizing the officer's tone was not just professional curiosity, it was condescending. I work at the courthouse, officer. I'm due there shortly. Vance chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Right, you work there. Janitorial administration. Elena's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly, the only sign of her irritation. I am a prosecutor for the state. Vance looked at her, a black woman in a luxury car claiming to be a prosecutor, and he simply didn't believe her. It didn't fit his worldview. Uh-huh. A prosecutor. You got a badge to prove that? My credentials are in my briefcase in the trunk. If you'll allow me to... Stay in the car, Vance ordered, his voice rising. I don't need you digging in the trunk. You know, people who lie to police officers just make it harder on themselves. Now what's in the boxes in the back seat? Those are case files, Elena said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. Sensitive legal documents regarding an active homicide investigation. And, officer, I must insist that we proceed with the citation so I can leave. I have a judge waiting. The judge can wait, Vance said, stepping back and leaning down to look her in the eye. I think you should step out of the vehicle. For a traffic violation? Elena asked, brows furrowed. That is not standard procedure. I have provided my identification. I have admitted to the potential rolling stop. Write the ticket, officer. I smell marijuana, Vance lied. It was a reflex, a tool he had used 100 times to bypass the Fourth Amendment. Step out of the car, now. There is no marijuana in this car, officer. I am a state prosecutor. You are making a grave error. Last warning, Vance said, his hand moving to the handcuffs on his belt. Step out or I will drag you out. Elena Ross knew the law better than Officer Vance knew the back of his own hand. She knew the case law regarding pretextual stops. She knew Pennsylvania vs. Mims, and she knew that resisting physically on the side of the road was a death sentence, or at least a guarantee of injury. The battlefield she controlled was the courtroom, not the roadside. I am exiting the vehicle under duress, Elena stated loudly, ensuring the body camera Vance wore and the dash cam of his cruiser picked up the audio. She unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the door. She stepped out, standing tall at 5'7", smoothing her blazer. She wore a tailored navy suit and pearls, the uniform of her profession. Vance spun her around immediately. Face the car. Hands on the roof. Officer, this is unnecessary, Elena said, complying. You have no probable cause to detain me outside of the vehicle. I told you I smell weed, Vance muttered, patting her down. His hands were rough, invasive. He found nothing but a phone and a pen. Stay here. Don't move. Vance walked to the back door of the Mercedes and yanked it open. Officer. Elena turned her head. I do not consent to a search. You do not have a warrant, and you do not have probable cause. Those boxes contain privileged attorney work product. They are confidential state documents. Yeah, we'll see about that, Vance said. If you're a prosecutor, you know I can search if I have probable cause. And the smell of narcotics is probable cause. There are no narcotics. Elena's voice was sharp now. You are fabricating evidence to justify an illegal search. I am warning you, officer, do not touch those files. Vance ignored her. He leaned into the back seat and ripped the lid off the first banker's box. He expected to see bricks of cocaine or maybe stacks of cash. Instead, he saw manila folders thick with paperwork labeled with case numbers and names. State v. Johnson. Grand jury transcripts. Autopsy reports. Most officers would have stopped there. They would have seen the official seals, the legal jargon, and realized they had stepped into a bear trap. But Vance was not most officers. He was a man who couldn't handle being wrong. He thumbed through a file, tossing papers onto the immaculate leather seat. "Officer," Elena shouted, "you are compromising the chain of custody on a murder trial. Stop immediately." Vance pulled his head out of the car, his face red with anger. He couldn't find drugs, he couldn't find money, but he couldn't back down. "You're acting very erratic, ma'am. Screaming at an officer, obstructing an investigation. I am asserting my rights." "You're done," Vance decided. He marched back to her. "Turn around." "Excuse me. You're under arrest." The sun was high now, casting long shadows across the pavement. Traffic on the suburban street had picked up. Neighbors were driving by, slowing down to gawk. A landscaping crew across the street had stopped their mowers to watch. What they saw was a white police officer manhandling a well-dressed black woman who looked like she belonged in a boardroom, not a booking photo. "For what crime?" Elena demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Name the statute, officer." "Disorderly conduct," Vance spat out as he grabbed her left wrist and twisted it behind her back. "And resisting arrest." "I am not resisting," Elena cried out as the cold steel of the handcuffs bit into her wrists. Vance ratcheted them tight, too tight. "You are hurting me. I have a previous shoulder injury." "You should have thought of that before you started screaming in the street," Vance said, forcing her second arm back. The click, click, click of the cuffs sounded like a countdown to his own destruction, though he couldn't hear it yet. "My name is Elena Ross," she said, projecting her voice to the witnesses across the street. "I am the lead state prosecutor for this county. This officer is arresting me without cause." "Shut up," Vance growled. He shoved her against the side of the car. "You can tell your lies to the sergeant." A silver sedan slowed to a crawl, passing them. The driver, an older white man, rolled down his window. "Officer, is everything all right? That lady looks—" "Move along, sir, police business," Vance shouted, waving the man off aggressively. Vance grabbed Elena by the upper arm, his fingers digging into her bicep, and marched her toward his cruiser. She stumbled in her heels, but regained her footing. She didn't struggle. She didn't pull away. She walked with as much dignity as a person can retain, with their hands shackled behind them. "You need to secure my vehicle," Elena said calmly as he opened the back door of the squad car. "The files in the back seat are classified. If they are lost or compromised, that is a felony, officer." "I'm having it towed," Vance said dismissively. "They can search it thoroughly at the impound lot." "If you tow that car with those files inside, you will be personally liable for compromising a capital murder case," Elena said, looking him dead in the eye. "Do you understand the magnitude of what you are doing?" Vance paused for a split second. Her confidence was unnerving, but his ego was in the driver's seat. "Get in the car." He pushed her head down, unnecessarily rough, and shoved her into the hard plastic seat of the cage. He slammed the door, sealing her in the claustrophobic heat. He walked back to her Mercedes, threw the lid back on the box he had rifled through, and called for a tow truck. Then he got into the driver's seat of his cruiser, adrenaline pumping, feeling like he had just taken down a kingpin. The drive to the precinct was a study in contrasts. Up front, Officer Vance was manic. He was typing on his computer, radioing dispatch with a pumped-up voice. "1 female in custody. Non-compliant. Possible narcotics vehicle impounded for search." In the back, Elena Ross sat in silence. She closed her eyes and began to categorize every single action Vance had taken. Stop without clear articulation of violation, pretextual questioning regarding destination, refusal to acknowledge identification, order to exit vehicle without safety justification, fabrication of probable cause marijuana odor, warrantless search of vehicle, violation of attorney-client privilege work product, excessive force during handcuffing, false arrest. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a prosecutor building a case. She memorized the time. She memorized the route. She memorized the ID number on the back of his headrest. "You comfortable back there?" Vance taunted, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Not so talkative now, huh?" Elena didn't respond. She knew that anything she said would be twisted. Her silence was a weapon. It made Vance uneasy. He turned on the radio, blasting talk radio to fill the void. He wanted her to beg, to scream, to bargain. That's what guilty people did. Her silence felt like judgment. They pulled into the station's Sally Port 15 minutes later. The heavy metal doors rolled down, plunging them into artificial light. Vance got out and opened the back door. "Let's go. Watch your head," he said, enjoying the ritual of control. He pulled her out. Elena's shoulders ached and her wrists were burning, but she stood straight. Vance gripped her arm and led her through the secure hallway toward the booking area. Usually officers brought in drunks, brawlers, or thieves, people who looked disheveled and defeated. Elena Ross looked like she was walking into a board meeting despite the handcuffs. Her suit was wrinkled from the car, but her face was composed of stone. They pushed through the double doors into the booking room. It was a busy morning. Several other officers were processing arrests. The smell of stale coffee and floor wax hung in the air. "Got a live one?" Vance announced to the room, puffing his chest out. "Disorderly, resisting refusal to identify." He steered Elena toward the main desk, where the desk sergeant sat on a raised platform overseeing the chaos. Sergeant Miller was 55 years old, a 30-year veteran who had started on the beat when Vance was still in diapers. He was drinking coffee and reviewing a shift log. "All right, Vance, what do you have?" Miller asked without looking up. "Traffic stop turned into a rodeo," Vance bragged. "She refused to exit, screamed at me, tried to hide evidence in the back seat, claimed she was some kind of lawyer." Miller looked up. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the woman standing there, hands cuffed behind her back, staring at him with an expression of profound disappointment. Miller's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He blinked. He looked at Vance, then back at the woman. "Vance," Miller said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Why is Ms. Ross in handcuffs?" Officer Vance frowned, confused by the sergeant's tone. "Ms. Ross? Yeah, that's the name on the registration. She was disorderly, Sarge, refused lawful orders." "Take them off," Miller said, standing up. "Now." "Sarge, I said, take them off." Miller roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. The entire booking room went silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing. Vance froze. He had never heard Miller yell like that. He fumbled for his keys. I don't understand. She has boxes of suspicious documents in her car. I smelled weed." "Suspicious documents." Miller came around the desk, moving faster than a man his age usually moved. "Those are court files, you moron. This is Elena Ross, the state prosecutor. She's the one who signs the warrants you execute. She's the one who puts away the guys you arrest." Vance's key slid into the handcuffs, his hands suddenly trembling. The click of the mechanism unlocking sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Elena pulled her hands free. She didn't rub her wrists. She didn't cry. She slowly rotated her shoulders and looked at Sergeant Miller. "Sergeant Miller," Elena said, her voice cool and crisp. "It is good to see you again. I wish the circumstances were different. Ms. Ross, I am incredibly sorry." Miller stammered, his face pale. "I don't know what this officer was thinking." "He wasn't thinking," Elena said, turning her gaze to Vance. Vance looked small now. The arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror. He realized the lies she told were truth. He realized the fake job was real. He claimed to smell marijuana. Elena continued, addressing the room as if it were a jury. He used that fabrication to illegally search my vehicle and violate the confidentiality of active homicide files. He used excessive force, and he refused to verify my credentials when offered. Miller turned to Vance. You searched her car. You went through her files. I thought. Vance's mouth was dry. She did a rolling stop. You arrested the state prosecutor for a rolling stop. Miller looked like he was about to have a stroke. Where is her car? Tow truck, Vance whispered. Get it back, Miller screamed. Get it back here now. If one piece of paper is missing, Vance, I will personally throw you in a cell. Miller turned back to Elena. Ma'am, please come to my office. Let's get you some water. Let's sort this out. I don't want water, Sergeant, Elena said. I want to file a formal complaint, and I want to call the district attorney, now. The fallout was immediate, but the real explosion happened 3 days later. Elena Ross didn't just file a complaint, she sued. But before the lawsuit even hit the docket, the body camera footage was released. In many cases, departments fight to hide the video. In this case, the chief of police, terrified of the political nuclear bomb that had just gone off, released it in a desperate attempt to show transparency. It backfired. The video was everywhere. It was on the evening news, it was on social media, it was being dissected by legal analysts on every cable channel. The image of Officer Vance, young and sneering, twisting the arm of a 52-year-old woman in a business suit, went viral. Did you see how he talked to her? She told him 5 times who she was. He planted the weed smell. You can hear him hesitate. The public outrage was fierce. It wasn't just about police brutality. It was about the sheer stupidity and bias on display. It shattered the blue wall of silence because even other cops couldn't defend it. Police unions usually rushed to defend their own, but the union rep for Oak Creek stayed silent. How could they defend an officer who arrested the woman responsible for prosecuting criminals? It was indefensible. Investigative journalists dug into Vance's past. They found what Internal Affairs had ignored. 18 complaints in 5 years, excessive force against a teenage boy, verbal abuse of an elderly man, profiling complaints that were dismissed as unfounded. Vance had a pattern of targeting people of color in the affluent suburb, treating them as intruders. Elena Ross held a press conference on the steps of the courthouse, the same courthouse she had been prevented from reaching that morning. She stood with her legal team, her wrists still bandaged. This is not just about me, she told the bank of microphones. I am a woman of means. I know the law. I have the district attorney on speed dial. And yet I was powerless on the side of that road. If this can happen to me, imagine what happens to a young man with no connections, no legal training, and no voice. Officer Vance didn't see a prosecutor. He saw a stereotype, and he felt entitled to dismantle my rights because of it. The department had no choice. They fired Kyle Vance 10 days after the incident. But that wasn't enough. The state attorney general's office, Elena's colleagues, opened a criminal probe into Vance for deprivation of civil rights under color of law. The civil lawsuit, Ross v. the City of Oak Creek, never went to trial. The city's attorneys took one look at the deposition of Sergeant Miller, one look at the body cam footage, and one look at the jury pool, and they pulled out the checkbook. They settled for $1.6 million. It was a historic settlement for the county, but the money wasn't the point for Elena. As part of the settlement, she demanded structural changes. The department was forced to implement mandatory implicit bias training, revamp their search and seizure protocols, and create an independent civilian oversight board to review complaints so that the next Kyle Vance would be stopped at complaint number 3, not complaint number 18. Kyle Vance lost everything. He was decertified by the state police board, meaning he could never wear a badge again in that state. His hunter mentality had made him unemployable in security. The last anyone heard, he was working at a landscaping supply company in a different county, bitter and still blaming politics for his downfall. The homicide case Elena was working on. She had to recuse herself because the defense attorney argued that the illegal search by the police had tainted the files. A junior prosecutor took over. They got a conviction, but it was harder than it needed to be. Vance's arrogance had almost let a murderer walk free. In the end, the story of Elena Ross and Officer Vance is a stark reminder of the fragility of justice. We like to think that authority commands respect, that badges and titles protect us. But on that roadside, in the heat of the moment, none of Elena's achievements mattered. She was reduced to a demographic in the eyes of a man with a gun and a grudge. The system worked in the end, but only because the victim was powerful enough to force the gears to turn. It cost the taxpayers millions. It cost a career, and it left a scar on the community that won't heal quickly. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If Elena Ross had been a nurse or a teacher or a housekeeper, someone without the power to fight back, would we even know her name today? Or would she just be another statistic, another person with a criminal record for resisting arrest because they dared to ask why? Do you think officers should be required to carry personal liability insurance for lawsuits like this, so the taxpayers don't foot the bill? Or is there a better way to ensure accountability? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe that justice should be blind but police officers shouldn't be, share this story. Let's keep the light on the truth. Thanks for watching.
Hands on the wheel. You've been sitting here too long. ID, now.
Officer, I'm a federal agent. My credentials are in my jacket. Slow reach.
Yeah? Funny story. Step out of the car. Don't test me.
Serious mistake. I'm compliant.
Turn around, now! You should have just listened.
Easy. I'm not your problem.
Officer Kyle Vance had been wearing the badge of the Atlanta Police Department for exactly 8 months when he made the decision that would implode his career and cost the city taxpayers $6.4 million. He was 23 years old, fresh out of the academy, and possessed that dangerous combination of inexperience and absolute certainty in his own authority. He walked with a swagger that hadn't been earned, his thumbs often hooked in his duty belt eyes, scanning the world not for opportunities to serve, but for opportunities to enforce. He was the type of rookie who believed that the uniform granted him not just power, but infallibility. One bright Thursday morning in July, under the sweltering Georgia sun, Vance received a dispatch call regarding a suspicious individual at a gas station off the I-75 corridor. The individual in question was Marcus Thorne, a 54-year-old assistant special agent in charge with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Thorne was a man who had spent 22 years in the trenches of the war on drugs. He had dismantled cartels in Bogota, coordinated multi-agency task forces in Miami, and lost friends in lines of duty that Kyle Vance only saw in movies. Thorne was a man of immense gravity, a supervisor who commanded the respect of federal prosecutors and hardened field agents alike. But on this particular morning, to the rookie officer speeding down the highway with his lights flashing unnecessarily, Marcus Thorne was just a black man sitting in a parked car where he supposedly didn't belong. What Vance did next, ignoring protocol, dismissing valid federal credentials, and physically assaulting a high-ranking federal official in front of fueling families, would become a case study in modern police misconduct. Before we get into the details of this catastrophic failure of judgment, I want to ask, where are you tuning in from today? If you believe that accountability should apply to everyone regardless of the uniform they wear, hit that subscribe button. We are building a community dedicated to the truth, and we need you with us. The Liberty Fuel Station sits on a busy stretch of road just north of the city limits. It's a sprawling complex, the kind with 20 pumps, a full-service deli, and a constant rotation of semi-trucks, weary travelers and locals filling up before their shifts. It was 10:15 a.m. The heat was already rising off the asphalt in shimmering waves. The station was bustling. Families were stretching their legs, truckers were checking their logs, and the rhythm of commerce was flowing smoothly. Parked at the far edge of the lot away from the pumps so as not to block traffic was a black Chevrolet Tahoe. It was clean polished with deeply tinted windows and nondescript government plates. Inside sat Marcus Thorne. He was dressed in a crisp navy suit, his tie loosened slightly, the air conditioning humming against the humid morning. Thorne wasn't loitering, he was working. As an assistant special agent in charge, his phone was a constant stream of logistics, warrant approvals, and personnel issues. He was 10 minutes early for a rendezvous with a confidential informant handler and was using the downtime to clear his inbox. Thorne had been with the DEA for over 2 decades. His career was a testament to discipline. He had started in street enforcement, kicking down doors in neighborhoods that law enforcement had forsaken, and worked his way up through intelligence, eventually overseeing operations that spanned 3 continents. He carried himself with a quiet, lethal confidence. He didn't need to shout to be heard. He didn't need to posture to be respected. His authority came from a lifetime of doing the job right. At 54, his hair was graying at the temples, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He had a service weapon holstered on his hip and a raid vest in the back, but right now he was just a man answering emails on his tablet, sipping a bottle of water. He had spoken to no one. He hadn't exited the vehicle. He was simply existing in a public space. But inside the Liberty Fuel convenience store, Brenda Miller was watching him. Brenda was 39 years old, a shift manager who had been working at this station for 6 years. She was a woman who prided herself on being vigilant, which was often just a polite cover for a deep-seated, unexamined bias. She watched the black SUV through the plate glass window, wiping down the counter with increasing agitation. In Brenda's mind, the equation was simple and flawed. A black man in a luxury SUV sitting idle for 15 minutes without buying gas. It didn't fit her narrative of a good customer. He must be casing the store. He must be waiting for a drug deal. She didn't see a federal agent reviewing case files. She saw a threat. She watched him for another 5 minutes, her anxiety spiraling into certainty. She turned to her coworker, a younger man stocking cigarettes, and muttered, "That guy out there creates a bad atmosphere. I'm calling it in." She picked up the phone and dialed the non-emergency line, though her voice carried the panic of an emergency. "Liberty Fuel on Frontage Road. There's a guy out here. He's been sitting in a black SUV for 20 minutes. He's watching the store. It looks suspicious. I think he might be waiting to rob us or sell something." The dispatcher asked the standard questions. Was he brandishing a weapon? No. Was he threatening anyone? No. Was he on the property illegally? Well, he wasn't buying gas. "I just want him moved along," Brenda insisted. "He's making the customers nervous." In reality, the only person nervous was Brenda. The call went out. Officer Kyle Vance was 2 miles away, patrolling a quiet subdivision, bored and looking for something to justify his shift. When the radio crackled with "Suspicious person, possible loitering subject in a black SUV," Vance's ears pricked up. He grabbed the mic. "Unit 4 Alpha, I'll take that. I'm close." He hit the accelerator, the engine of his cruiser roaring to life. In his mind, he wasn't going to check on a citizen. He was going to take down a criminal. He didn't act with curiosity. He acted with anticipation. Vance arrived at the Liberty Fuel Station at 10:28 a.m. He didn't pull into a parking spot. He swung his patrol car around and parked it perpendicular to the Tahoe, blocking Thorne's forward path. It was an aggressive maneuver, a power move designed to intimidate before a word was even spoken. Vance stepped out of the vehicle. He adjusted his belt, settled his hat low over his eyes, and walked toward the SUV with his hand resting near his holstered weapon. Inside the Tahoe, Marcus Thorne saw the cruiser pull up. He saw the aggressive parking job. He sighed a heavy, weary sound. He knew this dance. He had been a black man in America long before he was a federal agent, and he knew that the badge in his pocket didn't always shield him from the assumptions of local law enforcement. He closed his tablet, placed it on the passenger seat, and unlocked the doors. He kept his hands visible, resting on the top of the steering wheel. He waited. Vance approached the driver's side window. He didn't knock. He slapped the glass with the palm of his hand. "Roll it down, now." Thorne pressed the button and the window slid down smoothly. The air conditioning rushed out to meet the humid heat. Thorne looked at the young officer, taking in the name tag, the lack of service stripes, the tension in the jaw. "Good morning, officer." Thorne said, his voice calm, baritone, and steady. "Is there a problem?" "The problem is you loitering on private property," Vance snapped, leaning in his sunglasses, reflecting Thorne's face. "Let me see your license and registration. Do it now." Thorne didn't move his hands from the wheel. He knew that reaching suddenly was a death sentence in these situations. "Officer Vance," Thorne said, reading the name tag. "I am going to comply, but I need you to listen to me first. I'm a federal agent. My credentials are in my inside jacket pocket. My service weapon is holstered on my right hip." Vance laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. "Yeah, and I'm the police commissioner. I told you to give me your ID, not a fairy tale. Stop stalling." Thorne's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "Son, I am not stalling. I am informing you of my status for your safety and mine. I am an assistant special agent in charge with the DEA. This is a government vehicle." "Get out of the car," Vance ordered, stepping back and unsnapping the retention strap on his holster. "I'm not playing games with you. You want to impersonate an officer, we can add that to the list. Step out." Thorne knew the procedure. He knew that arguing on the side of the road with an amped-up rookie was futile and dangerous. He needed to de-escalate, comply, and sort this out with a supervisor. "I am stepping out," Thorne announced clearly. "I am unlocking the door. My hands are visible." He opened the door slowly and stepped out, rising to his full height. Thorne was 6'2", broad-shouldered and impeccably dressed. He looked every inch the authority figure he was. But Vance didn't see it. Vance saw defiance. "Turn around, hands on the roof!" Vance shouted, his voice cracking slightly. Travelers at the gas pumps stopped fueling. Heads turned. A trucker near the air pump pulled out his phone. "Officer, this is unnecessary," Thorne said, keeping his voice level. "If you will let me reach into my pocket slowly, I can show you my federal commission." "I said turn around." Vance lunged forward, grabbing Thorne's left wrist. He twisted it behind Thorne's back with a force that was entirely uncalled for. Thorne winced as his shoulder joint was torqued, but he didn't fight back. He allowed himself to be spun around and pressed against the hot metal of the Tahoe. "I am complying," Thorne said loudly for the benefit of the witnesses. "I am not resisting. Officer, you are making a grave error." "Shut up!" Vance hissed in his ear. He kicked Thorne's legs apart, patting him down roughly. He felt the hard lump of the firearm on Thorne's hip. "Gun!" Vance yelled, as if he had discovered a hidden bomb. He ripped the Glock 19 from Thorne's holster and tossed it onto the hood of the patrol car with a clatter. "You got a permit for this, tough guy, or is this part of the costume?" "It is a standard-issue government firearm," Thorne said through gritted teeth, his face pressed against the car. "Check the serial number. It's registered to the Department of Justice." Vance ignored him. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt. "You're under arrest for trespassing, loitering, and unlawful possession of a firearm." He ratcheted the cuffs onto Thorne's wrists, squeezing them until the metal bit deep into the skin. Thorne let out a sharp breath. "Officer, those are too tight. And you are arresting a federal supervisor. Do you understand the implications of what you are doing?" "I'm taking a criminal off the street," Vance said, smug satisfaction radiating off him. He grabbed Thorne by the arm and marched him toward the patrol car. "You can tell your story to the judge." By now, a small crowd had gathered. A woman in a minivan was filming. "He didn't do anything," someone shouted from the pumps. "He was just sitting there." Vance glared at the crowd. "Back up! This is an active investigation!" He shoved Thorne into the back of the cruiser. Thorne had to duck his head awkwardly to fit his tall frame cramped in the plastic seat. As the door slammed shut, sealing him in the stifling heat of the un-air-conditioned back, Thorne looked out the window at the young officer strutting back to the Tahoe. Thorne closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. He mentally catalogued every second of the interaction. The failure to verify, the excessive force, the tightness of the cuffs, the public humiliation. He wasn't just angry, he was disappointed. He had dedicated his life to law enforcement, to doing things the right way. And here was this kid destroying the public trust in minutes that took decades to build. Vance returned to the Tahoe. He didn't call for a tow truck. He decided to conduct a search. He had no warrant, and since he had already arrested Thorne, the search incident to arrest rules were murky at best, given the circumstances. But Vance didn't care about the Fourth Amendment. He cared about finding the drugs he was sure were in there. He opened the driver's door and started rifling through the center console. Nothing but government fuel receipts and a pack of gum. He moved to the back seat. There was a black tactical duffel bag. Vance unzipped it, his heart racing. He pulled out a heavy tactical vest with DEA emblazoned in yellow letters across the back. He pulled out a raid jacket. He found a file folder marked "Sensitive. Law enforcement eyes only." To a rational officer, this would be the moment of realization. The moment where the stomach drops and you realize you've made a terrible mistake. But Vance was deep in the grip of confirmation bias. Unbelievable, he muttered to himself. He went all out. Fake gear, fake files. This guy is a pro. He truly believed that Thorne was an elaborate impersonator, a cartel heavy using a disguise to move product. He didn't stop to think about the quality of the gear, the government plates, or the sheer absurdity of someone impersonating a high-level supervisor to sit at a gas station. Vance grabbed his radio. "Dispatch 4 Alpha. I've got one in custody. You're not going to believe this. Subject was impersonating a federal agent. I've found tactical gear weapons, the works. I need a supervisor on scene to document this bust." He was beaming. He thought he was a hero. He thought he was about to get a commendation. 10 minutes later, Sergeant Thomas Kowalski pulled into the Liberty fuel station. Kowalski was a 28-year veteran of the force. He was tired, cynical, but deeply fair. He had seen rookies make mistakes before fender benders lost paperwork, bad attitudes, but he had never seen a scene quite like this. He saw Vance's cruiser, the black Tahoe, and the crowd of people holding up phones. Kowalski stepped out of his vehicle, hitching up his belt. He walked over to Vance, who was standing by the trunk of the Tahoe, guarding the evidence he had pulled out. "All right, Vance, what do you have?" Kowalski asked, his eyes scanning the scene. "Sarge, this is huge," Vance said, practically vibrating with excitement. "Guy was loitering. I approached, he gave me attitude, claimed to be a Fed. I detained him, found a gun on him, searched the car. Look at this." He pointed to the DEA vest and the raid jacket. "Full kit. Fake as hell, but high quality. I got him in the back." Kowalski looked at the gear. He reached out and touched the vest. He felt the weight of the ceramic plates. He looked at the stitching. He looked at the raid jacket. Then he looked at the Tahoe. He walked around to the back and looked at the license plate. U.S. government. He looked at the tires' run flats. He looked at the lights hidden in the grill. A cold knot formed in Kowalski's stomach. He had worked joint operations with the feds before. This didn't look fake. This looked standard issue. "Vance," Kowalski said slowly, "did you run the plates?" No, I was securing the scene," Vance stammered. "Did you check his ID?" "He told me he had credentials, but I knew he was lying. I didn't want him reaching for a weapon." Kowalski stared at the rookie. "You arrested a man claiming to be a federal agent driving a car with government plates carrying government-issue gear, and you didn't check his ID. Sarge, he's a perp. Look at him." Vance pointed to the cruiser. Kowalski walked over to the patrol car. He peered through the wire mesh. He saw Marcus Thorne sitting there, sweat beading on his forehead. His suit jacket crumpled his wrists, twisted behind him. But he also saw the face. Kowalski stopped. He recognized that face. 2 years ago, at a multi-agency briefing on I-75 drug trafficking, the keynote speaker had been an ASAC from the Atlanta division, a man who spoke with absolute authority. Kowalski opened the rear door. "Sir." Thorne looked up. "Sergeant, my name is Marcus Thorne. I am the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the DEA Atlanta Field Division. My credentials are in my inside left jacket pocket. Your officer refused to look at them. I suggest you do so immediately." Kowalski swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm going to need to verify that." "Do it," Thorne said. "And get these cuffs off me before I lose feeling in my hands." Kowalski reached into the jacket pocket. His fingers closed around a leather wallet. He pulled it out and flipped it open. The gold shield gleamed in the sunlight. The ID card was sophisticated holographic with a photo of Thorne that matched the man in the back seat perfectly. Department of Justice, Drug Enforcement Administration, Assistant Special Agent in charge. Kowalski felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at the badge, then at the Tahoe, then at Vance, who was still standing there with a smug grin. Kowalski turned on his heel and marched back to the rookie. "Vance," Kowalski said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Give me your keys." "What? Why?" "Give me the keys to the cuffs. Now." Kowalski snatched them from Vance's hand. He walked back to the cruiser, leaned in, and unlocked the handcuffs. Thorne rubbed his wrists. There were deep, angry red indentations where the metal had cut in. "Sir," Kowalski said, his voice trembling slightly. I don't have words. I am verifying with the field office right now, but I believe you. Please step out. I can get you water. I can call a medic." Thorne stepped out of the car, straightening his suit. He looked at Kowalski. "I don't want a medic, Sergeant. I want your lieutenant. And I want the name of that officer." Kowalski nodded. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number for the DEA Atlanta Field Division. He put it on speaker. "This is Sergeant Kowalski, Atlanta PD. I have a Marcus Thorne here claiming to be ASAC." The voice on the other end was sharp. "Thorne. Yeah, he's our ASAC. We're waiting on him for a briefing right now. Why do you have him?" "There's been a misunderstanding," Kowalski said, looking at Vance. "We're clearing it up now." Kowalski hung up. He turned to Vance. The rookie looked confused. "Sarge, what's going on? The badge is fake, right? You can buy those online." Kowalski stepped into Vance's personal space. "Shut up, Kyle. Just shut up. That is a federal agent. That is a real badge. That is a real gun. You just assaulted and arrested a federal supervisor because a clerk thought he looked suspicious. You didn't run the plates. You didn't verify the ID. You profiled him, you tuned him up, and you threw him in a cage." Vance's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The reality of what he had done crashed down on him. The $6.4 million mistake had just been made. Thorne walked over to where his tactical gear was strewn on the hood of the patrol car. He began to repack it calmly. "Sergeant," Thorne said without looking up, "I want everything documented. I want the body cam footage secured immediately, and I want this officer's badge number." "You'll have it all, sir," Kowalski promised. "Lieutenant is 5 minutes out." The next hour was a blur of high-ranking brass arriving on the scene. A lieutenant, then a captain. The DEA dispatched 2 agents to the scene to secure Thorne's vehicle and gear. Officer Vance sat in the back of Kowalski's car, stripped of his weapon, staring blankly at the seat in front of him. He had gone from hero to pariah in the span of 30 minutes. The video footage from the bystanders hit the internet before the police report was even filed. Atlanta cop arrests DEA boss. Rookie profiles federal agent. The optics were disastrous. A young white officer manhandling an older, distinguished black official who was clearly identifying himself. The comments section was a firestorm. The investigation was swift. Internal Affairs found that Vance had violated nearly a dozen policies. Use of force failure to identify illegal search conduct unbecoming bias-based policing. The suspicious activity, cited by Brenda Miller, was debunked immediately. Checking emails is not a crime. Marcus Thorne filed a civil rights lawsuit. He didn't do it for the money. He did it to force a change. The lawsuit named Vance the Atlanta Police Department and the City of Atlanta. It alleged false arrest, excessive force, and racial profiling. The evidence was insurmountable. The body cam footage showed Thorne being polite, calm, and compliant, while Vance was aggressive, profane, and dismissive. The city settled for $6.4 million. It was one of the largest settlements for a single incident of police misconduct in the state's history. But the check was just paper. The real cost was the erosion of trust. Kyle Vance was fired 4 weeks after the incident. The termination letter was scathing. He was decertified by the state post council, meaning he could never work as a police officer in Georgia again. His career was over at 23. He had wanted to be the police so badly that he forgot how to be a peace officer. Brenda Miller, the clerk who made the call, was let go by Liberty Fuel after the corporate office faced a boycott. Her vigilance was revealed as the prejudice it was. As for Marcus Thorne, he returned to work. He continued to lead task forces. He continued to fight the drug war. But he carried the scars of that day. He carried the knowledge that even after 22 years of service, even with the gold shield in his pocket, there were people who saw him not as a protector, but as a suspect. And that brings us to the uncomfortable truth of this story. We like to think that authority recognizes authority. We like to think that the good guys are always on the same team. But bias is a blinder. It prevented a manager from seeing a customer. It prevented an officer from seeing a colleague. It stripped away reason and replaced it with assumption. Officer Vance saw what he wanted to see. He wanted a bust. He wanted a bad guy. And because of that desire, because of that arrogance, he destroyed his own life and inflicted trauma on a man who deserved nothing but gratitude. The system worked. In the end, Vance was fired. Thorne was paid, but only because Thorne had the power of the federal government behind him. What happens when the driver isn't a DEA supervisor? What happens when it's a teacher, a mechanic, a student? That is the question that should keep us up at night. Thorne stood in front of the cameras after the settlement was announced. He looked tired. "I don't hate the police," he said quietly. "I am the police. But we have to be better. We have to be smart enough to listen and humble enough to admit when we don't know who we're dealing with. If we can't do that, we don't deserve the badge. So I leave you with this. Should rookies be required to have a partner for their first 2 years? Should calling the police on suspicious people based on zero evidence carry a fine? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please like the video and share it. We need to keep telling these stories until the lesson is finally learned. Stay safe out there, and thanks for watching.